All right, it is the final edition of Riding Home here for the week of Georgia-Alabama. The Dogs about a 13.5 point underdog to Alabama this week, Dylan, which is, to me, just a little too much.
I think that's too much.
I think if it were 9 or 10, I could understand that. I also, I think it's. I'll point this out, and then we'll move along to a serious discussion. When you see a 13-point line, a 13-point line would indicate to you that the team that's an underdog would have something around a 15 to 20% chance of winning. I mean, it's not a real big chance of winning. But when you look on ESPN, who has just come up with this FPI number, it doesn't correlate in any way with what statistically Las Vegas's number is. Now, it's my big thing is the FPI just doesn't seem to make much sense to me, but that's me, and I know that doesn't really matter that much. I just sometimes
I don't like the FPI.
I don't know what the hell it means.
Yeah, I don't.
Now, according to that metric, the Dogs have something like a 38% chance or so to win. I think if you're Georgia, I would say it's something like that. I would say, in this case, that number seems to be about right. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all that Georgia wins this game. I think they are more likely to win this game. They are about as likely, to me, somewhere around the range that LSU was to beat Georgia. It's something like that. Or it was about the likelihood that Florida would beat Georgia. It's in that realm. So if you're going to say that you think Georgia will win, I need a real reason why. That's what I'm coming up with. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I want to know why you think Georgia wins, Dylan. If I'm not saying you do think that, but give me the explanation here.
Well, the run game's working. That's a reason they would win. The run game's working for them, and that their offense is able to run as it usually does, or as it usually has since LSU, I should say. That, and they're able to get a turnover. They have to get a turnover, I think, at some point in this game. And if they could get a non-offensive touchdown, then I think we're talking seriously that Georgia could win this game. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, in 2012, where the Dogs were an 8-point dog to Bama, they had a non-offensive touchdown, which was essentially a turnover. They extended the game. They extended the offensive drive that turned into their first touchdown of the game when they went for it, when they faked a punt. So there are ways to change the ball game. My big thing, and people who I've talked with who played sports in college, their thing is, is this Tua guy going to have a bad night at some point? Everybody who's played in college would say to you, just don't play well sometimes. Is this the moment where he doesn't play well?
Especially as a sophomore in college.
But here's my thing. He's already proven, he's not going to freak out.
Yeah.
If he was going to freak out, he would have freaked out last year when they stuck him in there. But the other thing I would say, too, though, is that when you are... Does Alabama get tight if this game gets tight? Neither of these teams have played a game that was actually competitive in the fourth quarter. Yeah. Has Georgia? I guess LSU.
It was. I think at the beginning of the fourth quarter in LSU, there was still a chance, but then that kind of
when Jake took the sack, it was over.
Yeah, that went away kind of quick.
But when was the last time Alabama had a tight game in the national championship game? Exactly. And the time before that, I guess the Auburn game last year, but they were kind of out of that game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. By the end of that game.
So we're going to see which of these two teams really have. Well, we may not see, but that would be a moment at which certainly, if you are, Georgia, does Alabama? Because everyone's human nature, even though you get as much great training as you get at both of these institutions, everyone is really a creature of being a human. I mean, they're humans. So what happens if Alabama, you can't tell me both these teams don't know that one is a prohibitive favorite. I mean, Alabama is a bigger favorite over Georgia than Oklahoma is over Texas.
That's insane.
I mean, if what I'm saying is true, and I'm just some guy that talks about this all the time, so I'm not hardly all-knowing, But if Georgia's a 14-point dog to Alabama, what's that make Oklahoma? Because Georgia would be favored against Oklahoma from what we understand. Would that mean Oklahoma would be a 17-point favorite? Clemson would only be like an 11-point dog? I mean, sometimes this stuff just gets out of control, and I think that we've had a little irrational exuberance as it relates to betting lines here that have pumped this number up pretty high.
I thought 10 was 10.
I think 10's about right.
Yeah.
9 to 11 would have been my range, but and by the way, you're still a pretty big underdog then too. But you can't tell me that everyone that's playing this game doesn't know who the prohibitive favorite is, because they do. They do. Yeah. I mean, and the question is, if you are the prohibitive favorite like that, the massive favorite over one of the very few teams that can beat you, what are you worried about if you're Alabama? And if you're not worried, what happens when you suddenly get worried during a game? See, that's what happens in sports sometimes.
I wonder if Georgia, of course, they've made the they don't believe the 13.5 line, the 13 line. They think that's bullshit.
It is bullshit.
And honestly, I'm wondering if Alabama kind of agrees with it. They might think, we're going up against one of the best teams in the country. Sure, we can beat them.
They could beat them by 14. That's not my point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they know it's going to be more difficult than that. Because that makes it sound like, they're just going to blow them out.
I mean, 14, Georgia Tech was I think a 16-point dog to Georgia. That game was not competitive in any way. So, I mean, if it sounds like I'm offended by the line, I just think it's wrong. I don't bet. But it is a metric, and I think you do have to pay attention to numbers. Numbers do matter. But, is it really reality, or has it been pumped up by something that's not reality? I don't know. I think if you can run the football and you're Georgia, you're an underdog, but you're only slightly an underdog at that stage, because then you can control the clock, then you can keep Tua off the field, then you can play your football game. Georgia can't win this game being something they're not.
Well, yeah, they tried to do that against LSU.
Didn't work.
Yeah, and that was against
was
LSU.
Not successful.
Not at all. And I mean, that was against 3-loss LSU. If you're not going to play your game against undefeated Alabama, then you're going to get stopped.
There's no shame in playing your game and losing either. By the way,
not at all.
I mean, I don't think there's any shame in losing this game. Period. I think there's shame in losing this game if you don't play your game. Like if you come out there with some tiddlywink bullshit, come on, go play your game. And I don't know why I keep saying it, only because we've seen it once with LSU. I mean, Georgia played its game against Auburn last year and just got its doors blown in.
Yeah, I mean, there was just some crucial mistakes in that game. You had the roughing the punter on DeAndre Walker, and then the muffed punt, and
those basically ended that game, because this team, this program, I mean, they have lost exactly 3 games since the start of the second year. In other words, in 2016, with the 5 losses, we can't get to 5 losses this season in 2 years. It's impossible.
Yeah,
they can't lose 5 games in 2 seasons with what's left on the schedule. So Georgia is now certainly, I would say, more what we've seen in 2017 and 18 than anything we saw in 16.
16 will be looked at as just kind of like a weird.
Bob Stoops, his first year at Oklahoma, had a 6-6 season or 7-5 season, whatever it was. I think
Nick Saban was like what, like 5?
7-5, 7-5 with a win over Colorado. Bob Stoops was 7-5 or 6-6 with a win or loss against Mississippi in the Independence Bowl. Things change. I want to ask you this, and you only have so much perspective with your age, but what do you think a Georgia win means to the landscape of college football?
I mean,
first of all, 2 things. First, what does a win mean if it knocks Alabama out of the playoff? What does a win mean if it doesn't knock Alabama out?
Well, if it doesn't knock them out, then it
only means so much.
Yeah, because then Georgia's got to probably go and beat them again, and it's just going to be the same kind of ordeal as last year. Yeah. As Georgia's the SEC championship, Georgia celebrates that, and people are like, okay, hey, maybe this means something. But then Alabama, as a non-conference champion, just comes in and maybe wins the national championship again.
What if the Tide are eliminated? What if this is a 10-point win by Georgia because they got up 17 in the fourth, Alabama scores a junk touchdown with 4 or 3 minutes to go, they never get the ball back, Oklahoma wins by, 20 over Texas, secures their way into the thing because of the lopsided nature and the committee becomes a prisoner in the moment, and Alabama does not get into the playoff, a scenario the likes of which you and I probably don't think will happen. But what happens if Georgia gives Alabama a loss? Can that change the trajectory of the way everyone looks at things? Or did the loss last year by Georgia to Alabama, did that change anything?
Well,
because we're at the same moment we would have been had Georgia won that game too.
Except the difference with it this year is that this Georgia team looks weaker than it did last year, in my opinion, and this Alabama team looks stronger than it did last year on offense, for the most part at least. So I don't think it would be a huge shift like, oh my God, Georgia is now the new program to beat. I think it would still be Alabama, but it would be like in Star Wars Episode 4.
Here we go.
When the rebels blew up the Death Star. Because, the Empire was all.
If you don't blow up the Death Star, you're done.
Yeah, and of course, the Empire was still, on top.
Control.
They were still, rolling calling the shots. But the rebellion now had some, people were like, oh shit, they could actually do this thing. And of course, it was still an uphill battle to take that job, to take that top spot in the galaxy. But
are we still in episode 4, or have we moved on to Strikes Back?
No, I think Georgia's still on episode 4. They got to blow up the Death Star. They went on. They tried to last year. They attacked it, and they failed. They didn't have a Luke Skywalker.
Or are we in the midst of the attack still? See, that's another question.
Well,
because remember, the first run was a no-go.
Yeah, it was a failure.
It was a failure. They hit it. Actually,
they got shots off.
They did, and they just
missed.
It didn't go the way that they needed it to go, and then Luke gets in the thing and takes it from there. But that's my, question, so to speak, is, at what stage does, I guess we're comparing it to Star Wars, but at what stage does Georgia wrestle this thing away from Alabama? It only starts with a win.
Yeah, they have to beat the program first. They got close last year, but they didn't beat them.
Right.
So as much as it was a change for Georgia last year to kind of show that they were on the national stage more so, it wasn't anything to deter Alabama from their spot.
I think that's the big thing to remember here too, is now these two teams will have played 2 years in a row. We don't know for sure if they'll play in 2019. Probably my guess would be that they'll play in the conference championship again, but they will play again in 2020. So these, for sure, regular season. So these two teams are not exactly, they're going to see each other a lot in a way that, like, Oklahoma's played Alabama once, Clemson's played them 3 years in a row, but with those two teams, there's no guarantee that they will have to face one another just to get into the playoff. And this may go for Alabama too here in the near future. Just to get into the playoff, these two teams may have to beat one another on a yearly basis.
Yeah, it's just going to be that extra hurdle. They will have to play likely the second or one of the top 4 programs in the country every single year.
And you hear Herbstreit now, and I hadn't thought of this, but I think he might have a point here. There's no certainty that Oklahoma beats Texas. They've lost to them before this season. They were the better team, but they lost. We've seen Ohio State not just shit the bed, but shit the bed, take it, throw it on the walls, and all sorts of stuff. No diaper required. What happens if those two lose? See, that's where you get into a real problem. You can't go to 9-3 Florida. You're going to tell me they're going to take 13-0 Central Florida without its starting quarterback into the playoff? There's much to monitor. Oklahoma gets to go first. They get to say, all right, and by the way, that thing, I've been reading a lot about that. That is a nasty little thing right now. those two.
The whole.
I think it's
ordeal?
getting worse.
It's gonna be a chippy ass game.
I mean, but Oklahoma and Texas have always been big rivals. No one needs to explain that to me. What I'm saying is,
it's never been on this platform.
This is pretty bad.
I mean, it's never been a conference championship game. It's always just been a midseason rivalry.
That's a good point. But you got the quarterbacks chirping at each other post game.
Yeah.
You've got the Oklahoma players now. Lincoln Riley is trying to mitigate whether the officials will allow them to do the horns down.
They can't. They said they can't.
Which is kind of stupid.
I think it's kind of stupid too.
Okay, but okay. Does OU have a sign?
Yeah, it's a thumbs up.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's pretty. Or no, that's the Aggies. My bad. They do this. They do just the index finger. Yeah, number one.
All right, that's not a sign. That is a nasty little thing. And what I'd like to know is what happens if Texas wins that game? I mean, that's it for Oklahoma. And then you got Ohio State with, I guess, all the pressure in the world. I don't know if Georgia loses by a field goal if they're out. If Oklahoma wins, yes, they're out.
I don't think so, but they need a lot of help. They
don't need a lot of help. They need two things to happen that have happened already this season.
Oklahoma to lose, which isn't out of the realm.
No.
And Ohio State, which is
that's the harder one.
That's a lot harder. And I know they shit the bed against Purdue, but
they do, or they did. I just wonder if they can. I mean, Northwestern is okay. But they've lost to Akron, a team that's 4-7 and not very good.
And that's like a 4-7. We're not talking like a 4-8 ACC.
Well, they're about to be 4-8 because they're going to play South Carolina. And they're a 30-point dog. So that's that. I mean, I don't think that Clemson, who is a 4-touchdown favorite over Pitt, I don't think that if Clemson loses, that they would get knocked out. I guess would they?
Once again, they'd need a lot of people to lose. They need the people to
So you think if Clemson loses, Georgia losing and gets knocked out, there's only two teams who can quote-unquote get knocked out, which are Clemson and Georgia. And Alabama, I guess, too. But there's only two games. Yeah. So you think if Clemson loses, they get knocked out?
I mean, their schedule sucks. That's the only issue.
Who is their best win?
A&M.
Yeah, that's not great.
8-4 A&M. I think that's their best win.
Who is Alabama's best win? LSU, I guess.
Yeah,
in theory, it would be Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just get to the point where I think there really are legitimately 6 teams nationally, and it's the ones we're talking about. I think the worst of the 6 is probably Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think most people would agree on that. I mean, but they've gone undefeated, and they have beat some good teams. Beat the win over Michigan's huge for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean they didn't slip up anywhere.
No.
So.
No.
I guess I think they deserve a shot at it. I guess, but I don't think they're the best team.
I think they're the weakest of the 4. I think they're the weakest of the 6.
Yeah.
I just don't think, when you watch them, that there's anything that great about them. See, what annoys me about crosswalks is they could hustle a little further here.
I always make sure to hustle because I feel bad, especially when it's like a green light here. When you're trying to turn right on red, then I'm not going to hustle for you.
Right, that's different.
But if I got a green light and someone's trying to turn, I'm gonna kind of speed up my walk.
This is not Manhattan where there's tons of people. It's just the two of y'all, and you could hustle it up a little bit. So we'll go to Atlanta Friday. Saturday will be the game. Georgia and Alabama have both played there twice. When did they knock down the Dome? 17. So Alabama has played there. No. Alabama has not played there twice.
Yeah,
Alabama's only played there once. Georgia's played there twice. Yeah. Do you think that familiarity will help Georgia in any way? It doesn't seem like it.
I don't think so.
I mean, I don't know why that would matter. What do you expect the crowd to be in terms of percentages? What was it last time?
In the national championship game?
Yeah.
I think it was pretty well split, honestly.
But the championship game for the SEC
was definitely
way more Georgia.
Yeah, it was more Georgia.
That was a home game for Georgia. And I wonder, in this case, would that be the case too? I wonder, would it be 60% Georgia fans? Of course, the problem is you can't tell because of the
colors.
Colors are so close to one another, and Alabama fans are not going to wear white.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell. I think more Georgia fans are going to show up to this, just because I feel like Alabama fans don't attend SEC championships as much because they're like, well, I'll just save it for the national championship.
Whoever wins this game, going to Dallas is not that bad.
Dallas would be great for me. I want them to go to Dallas.
The winner of this game, and I wrote about this in What We Were Hearing. If you're not a member of Dog Post, you should go check it out, dawgpost.com. What is going on in that house right there? That's okay?
That's Barbarita's HQ, I think.
That's a really aggressive.
Santa Claus.
They got some serious yard. What are those things?
A Christmas Mr. Potato Hat inflatable.
A lot of inflatable game there.
Yeah.
Little octopus action. If you're, we were talking about travel. I mean, the national championship game is in San Francisco.
That would be a pain in the ass.
I don't know how you afford that if you're these college football fans.
No, I mean that ain't stopping these people.
Well, at some stage it will, though. I mean, lately the championship game in 2000, I can't remember where it was for the 16 season for the 15 season. The 16th season it was in Tampa. Last year it was in Atlanta. Tampa and Atlanta, okay.
Those are easy.
Once you start talking about Phoenix, or I think it was in Phoenix for the 15 season. Once you start talking about Phoenix, California, places like that, that's getting out there, man.
San Francisco, I think, is probably the most difficult place to attend a football game for Georgia fans, for fans who live in Georgia.
The only thing worse would be Seattle.
Yeah.
I've made that flight before, and it is a serious flight. But I wonder when you start running out of money here with this stuff. I mean, you only had about 11,000 some odd people for both these schools that got official tickets from the conference. That's not that many.
No,
that means people
22. That's about 60,000 more
that are out there.
Yeah,
that means 60,000 some odd people are paying way above actual price, which I don't know what the price is for these tickets.
Yeah,
but significant, whatever it was. And then in the national championship game, I think are $750 or $650, whatever it is.
God.
I mean, it's tremendous. But if this is going to become a Georgia, Alabama, Clemson play for the national championship deal, that's going to cost those folks a lot of money, man. I have a lot of Clemson buddies and friends, and they spent a lot of money these last few years. But one of the good news was they didn't play in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah,
they played. They've played in
a drivable location
for the most part. They played in the Fiesta Bowl, and that was a pretty big. A lot of them, there are flights to start popping up, and people will charter planes and go out there. I think for San Francisco, see, the thing I think that is different about Georgia fans than a lot of other college football fans, it's not that Georgia fans will go for a few days. It's that a lot of them will go for a few days. New Orleans, that time, a few weeks ago, I guess now it's this stage, a couple months ago, that was taken over by Georgia fans. They were everywhere on Bourbon. And it was insane how many, you could not escape the Georgia fans. It shows the passion of the fan base. It shows the wealth of the fan base, frankly. And those two things combined push up prices for tickets like crazy. And I think if this is something that these fans have really wanted for a very long time, and Mark Richt started delivering it for them, but he was let go, not just for not getting over the hump, but for it not, it really was, it got to the point with Mark that they really had no real expectation to beat Alabama in the closing years. In 2012, they had a sensational quarterback, a running back who was clearly a freak.
Probably the best in college football.
Yeah, one of the best ever in college football, really. And you got to the point where, though, it had fallen apart. You didn't have a legitimate quarterback. You didn't have an offensive line to speak of. It had just gotten nasty. And Kirby has said, we're getting rid of all of the barriers that we've got. We're getting rid of that we don't have an offensive line. We're getting rid of, a lack of running game in big moments. They had the run game in 2012. That's what you saw in 2017. Those were what you didn't really see against legitimate foes in 2011, LSU number 1, and in 2015 when they played Alabama, and Alabama skunked them. Now, Alabama got some points off non-offensive touchdowns for sure, 14 of them, so that mattered. But they still were solidly beaten in that game because they couldn't move the ball. Driving rain didn't help. It didn't seem to hurt Alabama. Why? Because they had a run game. They had the Heisman Trophy winner, Derrick Henry, who had committed to Alabama and then backed away. The quote-unquote formula that everyone talks about all the time is great. It is a real thing. It's called recruiting. And then you develop. Develop is mental toughness. It's all this different stuff. But if you don't go out and recruit, you don't go out and get the guys, you will not win.
I mean, that's why this offensive line is so much better than it is.
How? Let me ask you this. Texas should lose to Oklahoma.
Yeah, they should.
They have not recruited like Oklahoma.
No. Charlie Strong had one really good year.
You're still dealing with a fair amount of Charlie's guys. Here, how many of Mark Richt's guys are still around? Natrez, Ledbetter.
Yeah, Natrez, Ledbetter.
DeAndre Baker.
DeAndre Walker.
What about Jake Fromm, Swift, the offensive line outside of Lamont, who was a defensive lineman under Mark? I mean, things changed. And what they did, and that's, again, I am a big Mark Richt fan. I think they got to get it going in Miami pretty quick or this is going to get stupid again. But the difference is the recruiting. There's a huge difference. And the morons who don't have any grasp of recruiting, who consistently say, or who used to consistently say, man, Georgia just really recruits really, really well. Yeah, they do when you're talking about versus the rest of the country. But versus the rest of the SEC, no, they really don't. And you have to recruit not just at a top 10 level every year. You have to recruit, if you want to win the league, at a top 5, top 3 level.
I mean, just because Alabama is consistently, and you have to meet that standard.
You have to match that.
And
they have these last 2 years.
Yeah.
This year and last year. Now, they got a little ways to go this year. And we'll be curious to see what happens as we close this book on this class. But that will be the key. We'll close it like this. A lot of my buddies, if you want to say it that, they think this is the last quote-unquote down year for the Dogs.
I think most people kind of see that.
So that's 11-1 season. They think this is the last down year for the Dogs.
Well, because this, I think 11. Yeah, it's not necessarily a down year, but I think the way
they're calling it a down year.
I know, but if you look at it from a greater perspective, yeah, for what they expect Georgia to be. Because right now, people are pretty confident that Alabama is going to win. And I think people are saying this is the last year where people will be like, okay, Alabama dominates this league and should beat everyone and won't really have major competition. I think after this is going to be the time where people are like, I don't know if it's going to be Alabama or Georgia.
Yeah. That's the question. Is this the last time? And it might be, it might not be. We'll just have to see. And we'll know more about 8 o'clock on Saturday. It really is a wonderful event, the SEC Championship game. I've been to 6 of them, I guess. I'm trying to remember how many. So it used to be the biggest game in college football, and now it feels like it's just a huge game that happens to come just before the biggest games in college football. So I'm excited. I can't wait. I want to see where Georgia stacks up to Bama, and Bama stacks up to Georgia. Final comments?
Yeah, I'm curious if Georgia can get the run game going against them early, and if they'll stick with it. I think they will, because just of an LSU game. But it will be curious to see if they can get past that 100-mark barrier of rushing yards, 150, to where they could really open up their offensive game.
Over under on how many times Kirby does the double clutch grip on the microphone screaming into it and it's caught by a television?
Television people are going to be looking for it. They want that shot in the SEC championship. But I think I'll put the over-under at just 1.
Okay. All right, Dean Legge, Dylan Webber. Go visit dogpost.com today. We appreciate everybody listening to us. This has been Riding in the Car by Dog Post.
See y'all.